Day. Chad Hartman here with you on WCCO. Certainly our show talks politics on a regular basis, and many times we talk about the polls and where they have moved at different times, and the conventional polls have showed a lead for Hillary Clinton the whole time, although you look at right before the first debate, it was extraordinarily close. Now, after the debates, after various scandals, most polls show the former Secretary of State with a significant lead over the billionaire from New York. But our next guest, Helmut Norpoth, who is a professor at Stony Brook University in New York, who has studied this for decades on a number of different elections, is saying we are looking at the wrong data, and I'm looking forward to our conversation with Helmut. Thank you for your time, sir. Tell me the key polling numbers you look for and tell people about your years of success in looking at these numbers.
Well, I don't know whether there's a magic poll number. I just know that polling people about how they're going to vote has been a very tricky business. And after the 2012 election, Gallup, the sort of gold standard in polling, found it so difficult to do that he went out of that business. He quit the business of horse race polling. And I think the issues are that you're trying to figure out what people are going to do at some point in the future. And voting, of course, is something that we're all supposed to be doing, so it's very difficult to figure out who is going to vote. In the end, we know that maybe 6 out of 10 eligible voters, the voting age Americans, will go to the polls. So when you take a poll, you don't know who these 6 out of 10 are. And so if you're wrong about that, then the prediction that you make based on the poll can be wrong as well.
Well, and, that's all fair, sir. I agree with that assessment. But you obviously have come up with a formula that you believe in, because how long have you been making predictions in looking at some data on races? Because one point I saw that you went well back, even past Kennedy-Nixon, and another story suggested that you started this in 96. How far do you go back with your methodology?
Well, if you're asking me how many times I've made a prediction ahead of time, like before it actually happened, then that would have been the 96 election. So that would have been the first election where I made a forecast ahead of time. Now, I'm using data going back to 1912, so I include elections back that time. And so hypothetically, you can say, well, what if you had tried to predict that election? What would your model predict? I mean, that's not the same thing really as making it ahead of time. But that's what I've shown too, that in past elections I would have been wrong only once in 1960.
So what is the model? What is the methodology, and how is it different than what we're seeing with the endless amount of polls that are available to us?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's not a poll-driven model. It doesn't include polling. It includes maybe what I should call the real polls, real elections, and primary elections are sort of my main asset that I'm bringing into the model. So I study how candidates have done in the primaries, and I have a metric that because it's a lot of candidates in the race. And so I make comparisons between the two candidates, and whoever has done better in sort of his or her respective party primaries, that's who I predict will win. That's the primary part of the model. And so based on that, I only looked at New Hampshire and South Carolina in this election cycle, and by my metric, Donald Trump was the stronger one across those two than Hillary Clinton. So Donald Trump gets the edge as a stronger candidate based on primaries.
So, but let me ask you this. Let's say it's a type of election cycle, and let's look at it from the Republican side. And the Republicans have 5 very, very strong candidates, and their voters have a very difficult decision. And then in this hypothetical scenario, the Democrats have one heavy favorite and 3 other candidates that are viewed as irrelevant. That's going to skew how the Republican might win versus the Democrat might win, and could that upset the formula that you're using?
Well, I think you have a point there. I think what is happening with Donald Trump is that he was so unacceptable to a lot of primary voters who preferred other candidates that while he got the edge over whoever was the strongest competitor, there was a lot of negative residue. Whereas I think with Hillary and Bernie, I mean, there was a little bit, but probably less. So you could certainly see it, and you see it right now with, I mean, you're from Minnesota, right? I mean,
yes, sir.
Paul Ryan.
Next door, yeah.
Not quite sure that he wants to endorse Trump. You don't have anything like that on the Democratic side, so there isn't that kind of a intra-party regret about Donald Trump that you have among Democrats, and that could be a big factor in the end. I reckon that.
Professor Helmut Norpoth from Stony Brook is with us. He has taken a look at the methodology which he thinks makes most sense. And looking at this, going back to 1912, it has only been wrong one time. That was in the 60 race between Nixon and Kennedy. And he looks at this and says Donald Trump would win. So let's stay with the bit of your last answer. I think almost all of us would agree that this is just such a unique election. It is bizarre in some of the comments. We are looking at the two most hated candidates ever for their parties. Why wouldn't this one be an outlier then? Why wouldn't you just say, my methodologies worked elsewhere, but all this information just supersedes that at this point?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's certainly true. I mean, I certainly agree with that we have an election with the two, you said, most hated or least liked candidates, and that's sort of an unknown, sort of uncharted territory. So we might all be wrong. I mean, the polls do because of that, and I think a lot of voters probably have a lot of voters who have misgivings about both. I mean, there probably must be a lot who are really torn about both of them and have a hard time making up their mind and how they resulted in the end, and if they go one way or the other is certainly a key to the election. And that you're right. I mean, we have never seen before to that extent. So. That's a wild card.
When you look at the controversies, and you just look at Mr. Trump's performances in the two debates, and the feeling was that he slipped because of that, and we can debate how much he slipped, but the polling shows it. Then we get to the tax discussion on the $916 million write-off, and then the Access Hollywood tape. Has that given you any pause to how certain you were earlier in the year that Donald Trump would win this election?
Well, if that was the only story, if that was all, and Hillary was unscathed, I mean, I would say I probably should pack it in. But I mean, you hear constant revelations about emails, WikiLeaks emails about what's going on there, and now we have maybe possible quid pro quo between the FBI and the State Department. She's not sort of out of the woods either. I mean, that's what's going on. I mean, I think both of them manage to shoot themselves in the foot or have things said about them that sort of keep it in suspense. I mean, if one of them suddenly got out of it and just had positive news for maybe a week and the other one didn't, then I think it would probably go very strongly in that direction. But that's just not what's happening. I mean, it seems to be both of these candidates are constantly confronted with a barrage of bad news, some of their own making, some that other people inject, and this dynamic. You're right. I mean, it's just absolutely unheard of. So we may be in for a big surprise.
Professor, I enjoyed the conversation. I like your different approach, and thank you very much for coming on the show.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you, Professor. Let's pause right here. Let's get to a couple of those political items that the professor mentioned involving the former Secretary of State, because there are some issues that people should be paying close attention to. Back in moments on WCCO. Among the